This is a chat with bioelectronics expert Liam Johnson. An academic turned entrepreneur, he's making on-skin sensors to improve the welfare for rodents in preclinical testing. In this conversation, we explore soft electronics, biomimicry, venture capitalist funding, the power of genomics, and lots more. Enjoy.
So I suppose to start off, could you please tell us a bit about sort of your background, what you've done in terms of education and what that's led you? I know you've done some research as well, and up until now that you're an entrepreneur, could you just give us a brief overview, please?
Sure. Well, my background isn't actually in engineering. So I started off probably about 10 years ago working in biochemistry. So the way that I guess it started for me was I was really interested in questions regarding almost how to extend life. That was almost my aim to begin with when I was doing my course. However, I think I got very attracted to some of the technologies that were emerging in engineering, especially towards the end of my undergraduate degree. One of the biggest inspirations that really hit me were some of the devices coming out of, there's a group in Chicago where they make skin compliant sensors, and they basically incorporate microelectronic systems into tattoos. I just thought it was absolutely amazing. And I think one of the big problems that we have in biochemistry is almost we use lots of invasive tools to monitor animals. And it just seems like there was a nice opportunity here. So I started trying to transfer. I was doing biochemistry for a long time, but in my master's, I started to take projects involved in electronics and engineering. So in particular, I worked on neural implants. So I did a project doing nano roughening of materials to implant into rat brains. And this basically is a way of improving the biocompatibility of these materials. And then based on that, I decided to do a PhD where I moved to the University of Manchester and where I started to work on advanced biomedical materials. I think at the time I wasn't entirely sure whether or not I'd go down the route of electronics. Actually, I think there were some interesting things going on in terms of regenerative medicine and tissue engineering in particular. But I think when there was a bit of a decision to make, and I decided to go down bioelectronics. I think it just moves much faster. Tissue engineering is fantastic and it's doing some amazing things, but I think the bioelectronics in the past 10 years, the innovation that you've seen is quite impressive. And I think that it was. I just thought that it'd be an easier way to, make an impact more quickly. So that's what sort of drew me onto my PhD. And I didn't really start focusing on electronics until I started my PhD. So I mean, we can talk about it a bit more, but I think I have a set of skills when it comes to making it very precise, so I can make sensors for on-skin ECG, so electrocardiography recording. And I can design a system, but I mean, I'm rubbish at firmware, rubbish at all sorts of aspects of electronics. However, I think that what I've learned to do in my course is maybe develop a team and learn to rely on people and make connections to sort of fill these gaps. So hopefully that's a bit of a sufficient background, but do you have any questions based on that?
Yeah, that's good. So I think the idea that you're doing like bioelectronics that combines the speed of tech with like the impact of biology and science, and I think that's quite a cool intersection to be at, as opposed to, as you said, just tissue engineering or that sort of thing. So yeah, I think you said that you want to find non-invasive methods to like sense things and do experiments on animals in a lab setting, and of course that's very good for the animal, but big pharma, they're not known to be like ethical. So why is this in their best interest to use your product versus what they're currently doing now?
I think I'm not going to get caught here saying big pharma isn't ethical. I think they do work very hard to try and they call it the 3 R's: refine, reduce, and replace the use of animals in research. And it's more than, I guess, you really have to adhere to these when you're preparing a project. And in the UK in particular, we are quite good at reporting all instances of how animals are used. I'd say that isn't the case everywhere. If you go to the US, they actually don't classify mice and rodents in their Animal Welfare Act. So they don't report all this stuff. So a lot of research does go on where people aren't sure what's happening. And I think that people aren't really sure of the scale of it as well. And I wouldn't say that anyone's unethical, but I think what they are is maybe reluctant to share the amount that they do. I think that they don't want you to think about is how much research is done on animals, because it just doesn't look good for their product. Or if and to be fair on them, they do get a lot of backlash. And I think sometimes it's hard to explain the nuances of that you're trying to improve animal welfare. Some people just don't want to hear it. Some people they just have a very flatline stance, or they don't want to see animal testing at all. And I would argue that you can't. Every medical innovation, well, every drug that you've ever heard of, that anyone's ever heard of, I would guess who's listening to this podcast, has been passed through a rodent for preclinical testing. So it plays a really important part in getting these drugs in showing that they're effective, showing that they're safe. And so yeah, pharma, they do care about having these innovations moving into that, and it's not so much that they're unethical. It's just that they're just reluctant to share the data of what they're actually doing. And in terms of getting them to adopt technologies, I think they are quite keen to see anything which is. I think anyone is really in pharma, academia, public health, or government. They all do want to see technologies which come in and are able to monitor animals for the same in a more ethical way. I think that they just want to make sure that that's done while you're getting the same quality of data. People don't want to start sacrificing the quality of the testing that they're doing in order to make improvements in welfare. So you just got to make sure that your tools are able to be as effective as the more invasive approach. I mean, just to give you an example, we might go into later, what we're actually doing is we're making skin compliant systems to replace implantable systems. So at the moment, if they want to do, I think cardiovascular testing is a big part of it. So I think if you know much about, I guess, clinical trials, about 1 in 5 clinical trials fail due to a cardiovascular problem. And so and clinical trials are incredibly expensive. So in order to de-risk that entire process, people will pass drugs through small rodents as soon as possible in order to understand the impact that they have on the heart, and so they can either cancel a project or see it go through. At the moment, the tools that they use to do that you require that you cut it out, you surgically implant a small device into the animal, the devices aren't huge, but they are huge for mice. They can weigh about 20% animal's body weight, and once you put them in there, it takes about 2 weeks for the animal to recover. So we've developed something which I guess is less invasive, or we're trying to put something which is on skin, so you can simply remove that. You don't have to you don't have to go through that recovery period. So it's in theory a more ethical way of getting the data, but also it's quicker because you don't have to deal with this recovery period. So you have to really bring cost benefits, efficiency benefits, and ethical benefits for pharmaceutical companies to want to adopt your technology.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But obviously you're focusing more on animals and rodents, but could you just walk us through a bit more about why exactly you chose to focus on animals in the first place? Because presumably some of the technologies you're talking about with regards to monitoring could also be applied to humans. So is it just that maybe it's a more developed market in humans, or is there another reason?
Yeah, it's a good question. We get it a lot. I think there's really 2 answers to that. One of them is that we're much bigger. Monitoring humans is easier. It's a rare instance where you have state-of-the-art tools for monitoring humans which are more advanced than what you see in the animal space. Usually it's the other way around. People put products in animals first, and they move to humans. Because humans are a much bigger target than mice in particular, it's quite easy to get skin compliant patches. So we're actually trying to, if you look in the human space, there are some amazing companies out there making these flexible systems for humans. It's one of the reasons that I thought this would be a possible project. However, I think the real challenge now is almost miniaturizing that down so that you can start to monitor animals. So it's more than the electronics, it's the materials as well. I mean, when you look at mice, the skin alone is 6 times thinner than human skin and twice as elastic. So that's a challenge in its own right. To try and interface electronics with that compared to human skin is just a completely different engineering problem. So that's one of the issues. It's more of a problem. I guess for me personally, why I've gone into it as well is that I've worked in biosciences and biochemistry for some time now. I have a quite deep understanding of lab animal zoology, the biochemistry that goes on behind each of the model species. So it's an industry and a sector which I have a lot of familiarity with. So I can come into it not only as having some understanding of the engineering for the skin compliant sensors, but also having connections in that market, and also having a number of an understanding of the problems which biologists in particular face when they want to collect this data. So I think it's a place where I'm comfortable as a researcher coming in and saying that I can solve this problem, and I know people who want to buy the solution. So it is a problem which we need to solve, but also it's something which I fit in quite well in my personal CV. Probably is quite well suited too.
What sensors are you currently focusing on? Like, what type of data are you trying to get from the mice?
ECG is the big one, which I love. I mean, cardiovascular data, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, it's important to the sector, and it's also, I don't know if you guys know how much about it. ECG is just the electrical activity of the heart. So every time it beats, you can sort of monitor changes in the potential with two electrodes interface with the body. It's a really big signal. So it means that you can pick it up quite easily, and this becomes quite important if you've got small rodents. That's not to say that there isn't other things which we're interested in. Like I think a lot of people want to get EEG from mice, understanding brain activity, but it's a much harder thing to get non-invasively. You can get implants which can do it, but to do it with just a non-invasive patch for the head, it's a challenge which I think we'd be keen to tackle later. First, we'll get the big, we're still early doors, get the ECG done. Body temperature is another one which we want to tackle. Also motion, locomotion, so you're seeing how much they move around. These are quite easy engineering, well, there's relatively easy engineering challenges compared to some of the more complicated signals, but there isn't a reason at all why we can't start to look at muscle activity, brain activity, breathing's a good one as well, actually. Like if you have an ECG electrode, you can understand breathing, but it just requires a bit more data analysis. But the way that things are moving is the problem really with that, all these much more nuanced signals might not be the right word, but these more harder signals to acquire. It's just the amount of noise you get. So I think some of the exciting things which are happening, I guess, is that we can maybe start to filter out the noise using new tools as they're emerging, which are usually software based. So that's where we're aiming. But I think sometimes we're waiting for the innovation to sort of come in, or we need good team members who have experience in signal processing and trying to help us get those more hard to get signals. But ECG's got a market, and it's a good first step. So hopefully we can get our foot in the door with ECG, and then we can start looking at other more complicated signals.
And when you said there are new software tools coming out to help with filtering and processing, like are you referring to maybe any AI or machine learning tools?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can't name any, but I think that there are some which are commercially available already for some ECG tools. But yeah, absolutely. I think AI is going to play a massive role in removing noise from these signals. I think it's quite exciting, actually, with what you're able to. I mean, we talk about mice, but I think even in humans, the biggest problem, the reason that we're not all wearing EEG headsets for monitoring our day-to-day thoughts or controlling drones is because of just the amount of noise that we get. So I think if we can get, it's challenging, but if someone can crack that, you're in the big money.
Yeah, and outside just signal processing, do you see AI helping you with your product and helping you develop even more products in the future?
Oh, absolutely. I think you have to embrace it at this point. Even if, directly, we make hardware. It's not all AI. It's a bit disingenuous almost to say that the innovation that we've got is AI. However, I mean, from a day-to-day level, even just running a business, using AI is just it's so much easier to I mean, I'm a very mediocre coder, but with AI, I'm a brilliant coder. That's just kind of that's the biggest impact it's having on me so far. Is just personally be able to do firmware and things. But I think that when you're moving forward, yeah, I think it's very exciting what you can do in the signal processing. But I mean, there are other applications looking at looking at specialized materials, and maybe looking at. I think when you have lots of, in theory, we'll have a product where we're collecting data from lots of animals. You can coalesce that, and you can have a more sophisticated way of predicting how animals behave, and maybe even reducing the amount of animals you use if you can more reliably create almost digital twins for animals. I think it's a really exciting area, and I've got my eye on what's going on there. But it is moving fast, and there's so much of it as well. Sometimes it's hard to sort of understand all of it at the same time.
Nice.
Yeah, so just picking up on the fact that you're, I would say that now you're considering yourself an engineer, because you're making things, and we're training to be engineers. But you also mentioned how previously you worked in biochemistry and you worked in research. So I'm just curious to know about the differences between working in engineering and sort of making things, if you will, and also when you previously were, which was research, which is more theoretical. So I'm just curious to learn a bit about the differences and what led you to engineering, at least right now.
Yeah, there are I think there are lots of differences. I think sometimes it's a real, when I made that transition from a biochemistry lab to an electronics lab, which was in my PhD, my master's, my PhD, I mean, it's a sample of one of me, but I think that there's a real difference in culture between the labs which do these projects. I think with biochemistry, and at least in my experience, is a lot of really large sample sizes. Biology is actually quite unreliable, so you need to repeat things over and over again. The questions are very different. Whereas with engineering, I think it's easier to see something tangible that you can make at the end of it. It's with biology, it's almost it's an open question. It's really nothing's a guarantee even with engineering, but with biochemistry, it feels like at least in my experience, it felt like it's less. You're more likely to get a null result, and that's fine. It's almost what you're looking for. Is you just want to make sure that something doesn't work, and I think that's often more common, at least in my experience when I was doing biology. At least with engineering, it felt like you could move more quickly. So it felt like you could run a few tests, and you could be quite confident that. Let's say a material wasn't adhering to another material, you need to do it like 3 times and you know it. And whereas with like biology, you need to culture cells and to see if they're going to react properly to a certain drug or grow in a certain way, and they don't do it once. It could be 1,000 things impacting that, and so you should do it over and over and over again. So there's a lot more repetition. It can be more. It can feel more repetitive at least. Whereas with engineering, I do feel, at least in my experience, that I was moving a little bit more quickly. It is also easier, I think, to have a bit of a, like I said, there's this tangible product which you can sort of imagine having, and I think that is quite nice in engineering, is that you can sort of imagine that you've got a value proposition for your product, and you can sort of start working on that at the same time as doing the engineering. With biology, it can be a little bit more aloof, understanding exactly what the end of it is. But that said, I mean, there are plenty of examples of people making excellent products in biology. It just wasn't what I was doing. I was doing a lot of cell culture and things, and it wasn't working often. Whereas with engineering, I think it seems to have been. It just felt like it moves much quicker. I think you see that as well in the research space. In biology, it's a lot more focused on journal papers, and in engineering there are a lot of journal papers out there which are very important, but I think that in like machine learning, for instance, it's just all conference papers because it's just moving quickly. People they test propositions very quickly, so I think there's a different speed and there's a different emphasis on what's important or what's valuable as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned earlier the space you're working in is a very fast moving pace. So is that partly what got you so excited about the transition more towards engineering? Was that something that you really valued?
Yeah, I do think I like that. I mean, maybe I'm in a bit of a good position as well, as I'm making non-invasive devices. Maybe that's not fair to say that somebody's making implants where there is a lot more red tape to getting them to the next stage. But at least in my experience, making non-invasive devices and lab animals as well, where you don't have to go through, I can put my products on mice as soon as possible. If you make a medical device for human use, there's a lot more testing to get onto that stage. Not for a consumer device though. So it depends on what you're making, but I think that it's nice to get the reward more quickly, if that makes sense. Like, so once you've made something, you can test it, and you can more quickly move on to the next thing, or you can fail faster. That's even such a useful thing to know when something's not working. You can just abandon it and go to the next thing. If that's not happening regularly, you can start to feel lost and not know if you're sort of like moving in the right direction. So yeah, the ability to quickly test things on skin and know that they're working or they're not has been helpful for me.
And with your ECG device, how far along are you? Are you beta testing now? Have you begun to actually sell these devices? Are you still trying to iron out a few niggles?
We're still very, very early on. We've got, I guess, without getting too much into it, we've got proof of concepts and confidence they can work. I think we're ready. We've got some cash to move to the next stage, but you need a lot of money to really scale these things up, and often you need to make sure that we're at the point now where we're pretty confident with the tech. We have early adopters ready to go, but we have some validation we need to do, and we've also got we've got to demonstrate market potential as well. I think what it's really important that you show that you've got a really large group of customers who are interested in this technology, and you need to really, with what I'm doing, and we're looking for venture capital funding, you just need to, they need to be very sure before they fork out 100, 500 grand, $1 million, that you're moving towards a big enough market. So in some ways, it's less the engineering, which is the challenge for us. It's more that we just need to have this real understanding of the market and a body of market research, which isn't actually my background. So it's something which I'm trying to incorporate now. So this is equally as important, I'd say, as the engineering at our stage now. But as far as the tech, I think that we are in a place where it looks very. I think there's no technical reason why we're not going to succeed in that respect. It's just whether or not it's big enough, the market's big enough to take us on.
So just building on that, you mentioned the challenges, not just with the technology, but also with sort of getting VC funding and things like that. And you mentioned how that's a skill that you had to learn. So could you tell us a bit more about your experience with dealing with these people and essentially being a salesman instead of an engineer, and if that's something that you enjoy or something that you'd rather not do?
I really like it, but I think that it is another language sometimes. So it's almost, I mean, you guys are engineers, so you know that almost you learn this whole language of engineering. There's lots of jargon involved. There's a whole other language of finance, which VCs like to use, and it's almost like I feel like I'm learning that again. Also, you also can't use. I think some of the biggest problems which people face when they're moving from research environments, be it biology or engineering, is that they come in and they give pitches, and they do use the jargon which they spent years learning, and it's so tempting to sort of. It's the curse of knowledge. You don't know what other people don't know, and sometimes people assume that their technical expertise is almost a given for people. So going in and almost breaking it down in a really simple way, and almost when you're making slides, making them really incredibly simple, and like it can be painful sometimes because you put so much work into this project, and you've developed this really sophisticated device, and there's all this understanding of how it works, and you know all the terminology, but then you get in there and then they don't really even care about the tech that much. They want to know that it's going. They want to know the financials. They want to know that it's kind of possible, but they don't really. In my experience, I've been a little bit surprised that they don't drill down as much on all the testing we've done, which we spent so much time doing, that it's just not important to them. So I think that has been a little bit eye-opening, is that you just really need to focus that when you're speaking to these people, you need to really focus on the market and where you're moving in that and what's out there in that direction. I mean, having a great product is absolutely important, and it's fundamental to it's going to work ultimately. So you need to have that. I think almost learning to have that, you need to know the engineering jargon to get to that stage, but also you need to also not be tempted to bring it out too often. I think when you're speaking to these people, which I think that's been the biggest challenge maybe to me, is just be able to sort of moderate my language down a little bit when talking about some of these products.
So you said you're based in the UK, and one of the key benefits for you is that you already have like this network of people you know, and you can talk directly to researchers and other people who can help you develop your product. But of course, we've seen that funding seems to be easier to get if you're in America. Is that true? What's your experience with that? Do you wish you maybe started off in America or go there in the future?
I wouldn't say I wish I started off there. I think that going there is almost inevitable. It depends on your industry and what you're making. It's a little bit of a problem because we have so many great, intelligent people in this country who were trained in our universities, and then they take all that talent and all that training and they go to the States and then they start amazing companies there. But it is right. You're right. It's so much easier to. I can't remember the exact figures, but I think it's substantially easier to get cash on the East Coast of America. On the West Coast, it's even easier to get cash. So it is a huge draw, and there's a reason why people do move there. To be more specific to us, it is our market. So for instance, our biggest market, we focus on mice. The UK uses 2 million mice each year. The United States uses 111 million mice each year. So we can't, when we're talking about who we're selling to, it's nice to validate something in the UK. It's nice to work with people that we know, But moving forward, it's not even a drop in the ocean. It's so small. It's less than 1.5% of the global market. So you can't. And now we're not even in the EU, which is, I don't want to get to the conversation, but we're in a smaller market still than what we used to be. So for us, it just makes a lot of sense to start moving there and getting contacts there anyway. And then it comes a point, well, if it's easier to start moving there and getting contacts there, why not just base ourselves there, where it's easier to raise cash as well. So it's a conversation which we're having, and it's on my mind quite a lot. That said, I think the UK is quite a nice place to start, especially there's a lot of especially when it comes to animal research, people are open about what they're doing here more so in the US. They report what they're doing. There's more initiatives to improve animal welfare here than the US. They're less bothered about it there, or at least there's less of a there's less legislation in place to support it there. So it's a nice environment almost to test our device and to test our hypothesis and get us started. And maybe that's the case for some other industries as well. But I think you can't really talk about our market in a serious way when it comes to selling our products anyway. We need to look at the US and other markets, but the US is by far the biggest one. I'm not really trying to put down the UK too much either. I think compared to all other markets, the US is just so much larger when it comes to our particular area. So I think it's something that we probably will end up looking at, and I think we'll probably end up doing as well.
Yeah.
So maybe we could pivot slightly, and I know you're interested in sort of the technology, and especially as you said with animal technology, but I just wanted to ask a bit about sort of the whole landscape of I suppose biology and human biology maybe, because I think with the advent of certain computational resources that we now have and computational biology, I think this field is really very exciting. So could I get your thoughts on maybe the advancements we maybe could see, maybe in your field, but also broadly in the biology field that you were previously working in the coming years because of sort of this burst of new research that I think we're seeing?
So there's a good breakdown actually by the NHS called the Total Review, and what they do is they go into sort of these emerging technologies which the NHS has a plan or a strategy to adopt. I think it's pretty on the mark, where they're looking at 3 areas: digital health, AI and automation, and also genetics. I think one of the things which has surprised me a little bit is about there's been a lot of rhetoric about genetics and genomics for a long time, and it's coming, and I think it's going to be absolutely massive when they get down to it. But I think they've been saying this for 10 years. It's going to be we're going to all be able to get our genome sequenced on the NHS at request. But I think the NHS has got its own problems. But I think work globally, I'd be surprised if genetics doesn't play a huge role in how we interact with medicine. I think what you're probably going to see is much more personalized healthcare. It's all resource dependent, but these things can also become more resource efficient if you can use at home and point of care devices rather than bringing people into hospitals. So I think you probably see I work with wearable patches and things, but you can imagine something where you could put it on someone, or even just a device they have to enter data into every day, and it just saves them going to a hospital every week or so. So I think you'll see much more sophistication in terms of the technologies which are at home and able to almost bring some of the services that you see in clinics to the bedside at home or more remote areas. So hopefully this will lead to hospitals being less burdened and and being more efficient. I think remote monitoring as well is going to be more and more important, especially as we get stretched. I mean, you hear about it all the time, how stretched resources are in these healthcare systems. But I think you can do a lot these days through just even digital. I mean, even Zoom calls have become much more common following the pandemic. It's really been a bit of a catalyst to see some of this technology coming through. But I think that's going to become more and more extreme, and you'll probably see it becoming more and more. I mean, at the moment, it's all diagnostics that you tend to see, but maybe eventually you'll start seeing treatment. I mean, from what the point of view of like wearable devices, I think the ultimate goal is almost closing the loop when it comes to care and monitoring health. So I mean, we're a ways off it. I mean, I say that. I think there are some. I think you have these. I think diabetes. They have some pretty impressive stuff actually, where they have like blood sugar monitoring. But I think having things more like that, where you're able to monitor parameters like, say, the heart, and you can instantly know when someone's needs a certain drug, or they're experiencing a level of stress, and then that diagnostic almost goes automatically to the pharmacy, and so you almost the experts or the trained doctors can focus on problems, or at least give more attention to the problems rather than having to spend the time on 1,000 patients, 100 patients, instead giving their full attention to that. So I think that's probably what we'll notice. I think becoming more and more like this will also support more and more personalized medicine. Yeah, with the one, digital health, genetics, and AI. I think is also going to play a massive role, I guess, in I think it's interesting. It's all, from what I've seen, it's all hospital-based equipment or ways of analyzing hospital patterns. So I mean, like, big one's radiography, where you can sort of take a radiography scan these days, and it can diagnose conditions more reliably than even very, very good radiographers and doctors. And I think you'll see that for histology, so scans of disease and tissue. And increasingly, I mean, even with ECG, like what I developed, you can use ECG to sort of identify someone, and so you can identify AI can identify certain heart conditions with that. So I think you'll see it coming in cardiology. So I think increasingly AI tools will be there to sort of they'll do some of this more. I guess doctors quite like doing some of this stuff actually, but I think it's less very specialized tasks. You'll probably see AI taking these roles. Yeah, it's and also just becoming more efficient in terms of like the bed space which people use. I think you'll probably see tools coming in there to sort of identify when someone's going to be able to leave more quickly, so you can get patients in and in order to treat them more quickly. So when beds are going to be available, they'll know very quickly, so they can almost anticipate when patients are going to come in, and that's going to be more efficient. So you'll see these huge efficiency gains. Staff will become staff should become more apt at analyzing data and looking at patterns in data. I think that's really, I mean, what I think we need to do in preparation for this technology is just make sure that staff are trained to use it now while it's coming in. And I think it's one of the areas where I think about engineers would be useful. You look at these reviews, and I think there is an initiative out there, but I think they really do need to consider bringing people in with expertise in analyzing data and using this equipment to almost see it ushered in quickly, because it's going to be you look at how I've read a few books on how people want to treat problems in healthcare systems, and they always go for like managerial approaches, and I just think it's just not as effective as if you can get a good wide sweeping technological solution. It can be incredibly effective, and it can save a lot of time. So I think having people in there who are trained to use it more quickly will help it become adopted. It's almost like a catch-22. If no one's trained to use it, no one cares about bringing it in. And I think that's going to be important. Yeah, I hope that answers the question. Those are the three big areas anyway. I think genetics is also, I can't stress that enough, is how much genetics is going to change, or it'll completely eliminate so many diseases that we currently see. People get quite scared of it, actually. They'll sort of talk about how genetics might be used to, I guess, for healthcare, not insurance companies to try and discriminate against certain groups. But it is incredibly useful data, and it's one of the things which can save your life if you know that you've got a genetic condition. I think almost educating people on how useful this data is also going to be incredibly important moving forward, because it's going to make a massive difference. And I think there are lots of people worried about sci-fi, almost like dystopian sci-fi scenarios, people like test tube babies and things. But I mean, degenerative disease is no joke, blindness is no joke, and being able to like remove these before birth is going to be such a there's an opportunity cost to not embracing this technology while it's emerging.
Yeah. So a few weeks ago, I learned that the average consultant in the NHS spends 15 hours a week on paperwork. Whereas if they just learned to use technology and the latest AI tools better, they were implemented in hospitals, I feel like that number can be really chopped down a lot. So yeah, they're trying to implement lots of technology in hospitals. And one example of that are like robots, surgeons, or things that can help surgeons do more precise keyhole surgery as opposed to having to cut open a whole patient. And these devices, they're all like massive. They're all very like large, hard devices. And I know you have an interest in soft robotics. So why in particular do you think soft robotics might be better in some cases? And do you see the future, maybe 50 years from now, being focused more on soft robotics as opposed to hard robotics?
I don't know about the future. I think I like soft robotics. I think they're really cool. They're really interesting, and I've seen a few. They're not always it's the way that they can sort of deliver drugs. I've seen a few where they almost have like biological like form factors, and you can imagine them crawling down the thread or getting to sort of inaccessible areas without damaging tissue. And the materials are becoming more and easier. They're becoming easier to make. You can make flexible materials which are more biocompatible, and you can maybe integrate some electronics in there as well. I think they'll probably be used in combination with more conventional rigid systems. Because I think that you're seeing also miniaturization of rigid systems. I think the precision that you're getting with some of these surgical robots is really impressive as well. So I don't think that there'll be there'll ever be a lack of need for that. But I think that people can be probably quite creative with soft robotics if they work on it, and it's I don't know there's just I think it's exciting to think of the opportunities in biocompatibility when it comes to soft robotics. I don't want to get ahead of myself and say that I know tons about it, but I think that it is a very exciting area when you're sort of seeing some of these almost, I don't know, they almost move with rather than using mechanics, they'll use almost I guess the pressure-based movement systems. But it is I think they are very cool. I think they are very early doors though. It's very early doors for them. I think there's a lot of work to be done before they get to the point where they're almost equivalent to some biological systems. I think the reason I almost get excited about them is because you see in biology in particular, it's almost like that you can get soft form factors in insects, and which are very capable of drilling and being parasites into the system, getting into the system. And it sounds gross, but they're very sophisticated, and they I mean, in reality, I think that there's no reason why we can't develop technology to do these things. If parasites can do it, and they can get to these incredible areas, and then they basically emit drugs in these areas, and they sense data, and they respond to their environment. It excites me, the idea that we can design things which can mimic that. And I think there's no reason we can't. It's definitely state of the art, and it's definitely probably a little bit beyond state of the art. But I believe that we will move in that direction, and we will have equivalent systems which can do things which parasites can do. But there's a lot of this is very much 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line. I think that we're not quite at that stage yet.
Have you heard of slime mold before? It's this yellow mold. You might have seen photos of it. And the idea is that if you put food, and it really likes oats, so if you put oats in like all the big cities on representation of maybe the UK or Tokyo or something like that, and you put oats in all the major places, for example, train stations, then the slime mold will very quickly find the most optimal route for where you might want to have your trains. And this is one single unicellular organism just doing this really quickly. And I think that's just such a cool idea that we've developed systems as humans to do this with maths and logic, whereas we can, in theory, just use biological systems that are already out there to help us do this for us. We just need to figure out how we can harness that.
It's amazing. Yeah, it is always interesting when you sort of work on a problem for ages and you find out that some very obscure creature's got some incredible innovation which does it already. I mean there are a few ones which I've seen. Anyway, what was it like? I think even just like magnetic detection in pigeons, where they can sort of home based on electromagnetism in their left eye. I think it is just one eye is able to have as a compass in it, and I think it's just so bizarre that there's these sort of evolved innovations which people take inspiration from to this day. But yeah, there's a lot to learn from nature.
Yep.
Yeah, back to your point about genetics being sort of one of the fields that has a real future potential. I don't know if you've heard about what's happening with 23andMe, which is a personal genetic testing company, but they're really suffering in terms of business. And I would just want to get your thoughts about their company and what they're trying to do, and maybe the reasons why they're currently fairly unsuccessful, and are people overly concerned about data privacy, for example?
I'm familiar with the case. It is interesting. It's really interesting actually to see what's happened there. The reason that they're failing is pretty clear: is that they can't grow. They've got the market. They had a great product. It grew really quickly, but then they ran out of customers. It's not like you need to, once you've got your genome sequenced, you don't need to sequence it again. So they can sell all sorts of quirks and features on that, like so they'll sell like additional analysis and stuff tools, but people have already got what they want, so there's no repeat customers. That's so they can't grow, and that's why they've failed. Are they done for? It depends. Genetic information is really valuable, like really, really. I think that there was a bit of a hope for them that that if they could even just use, because they've got quite a big database. So when everyone put their data in, I think there was probably an option to do it, but you'll have basically said that you are agreeing to have your genome used for medical research. It will be anonymous, but it will be sort of used by, if they want to, they can sell it to certain companies for medical research. So I think their hope was that they would have some sort of proof of concept that their data could be used to develop a certain drug or something or other, and then a big pharma company or something would be able to pick that up, and then they would then save them almost and give them the money they would need to continue. I don't think that's happened. I think that they're still in deep trouble. So that it's a bit of a warning, not even just for genetics companies, for companies in general, is that if you don't, there might be a limited number of customers that you have, and that's might be what happens if you don't keep innovating or find a way to continue. I don't know what they could have done. They offered like a really basic genome test. So I think it was SNP, short nucleotide polymorphism. I forget. But anyway, there are different ways you can sequence genome data and get more information. But I think it's an interesting one. I'll talk about data privacy after this, but I think it is valuable information. Like if it's like I said earlier, if the NHS doesn't offer this, if you're interested in whether or not you've got a pre-existing heart condition, I think you have to go through quite a lot of hoops. See a lot of GPs probably have some sort of indication first that you're going to have this disease, and then they might sequence your data and they'll give you a very limited view of what they think you have. They won't give you all the information of the data, at least as far as I understand. Whereas this was an opportunity whether you sort of got the whole genome and you could see, you knew if you were prone to skin cancer, age-related. I know someone who found out they were prone to get early onset age-related macular degeneration, which causes blindness at age 30 if you don't have it treated. So I mean, that's really useful information. So now they can act moving forward wearing, it's like you wear sunglasses and you can reduce the likelihood by like 50 or 70%. Well, I don't know if that's exactly right, but you can reduce the impact that it has. And I think that's really useful information. So it has a lot of value, especially from the healthcare. I think from the healthcare area, people are also interested in ancestry data as well. But I think the healthcare alone is just so valuable to people if they understood it. That said, I think that's also the reason why people are worried about the data privacy, because they don't want it to be sent to insurance companies. I would probably say that it's not. I mean, you have the option now if anyone is subscribed to 23andMe, you can ask them to delete your data, and you can ask them to remove the sample if you've agreed with them to sort of take your sample. It is not clear on whether or not, if they get sold, that will be an option afterwards. And what happens to your data then is less clear. That said, I don't know if I would worry too much about it. It is a limited genome test, so they will get some information about healthcare parameters. And if you've got say you're susceptible to heart disease or diabetes, then in theory you could say that an insurance company will know that. But also you'll have known that. Like you'll be aware of, if you should know, if you find out from this test that you're susceptible to diabetes, you'll know, and then you can sort of tell the insurance company, well, we don't think that it's. You should probably then delete your data. I think, but then you'll also have that information that you're susceptible to diabetes, and it probably was worth it just to have found out that information. To be completely honest, if you've gone through the test and you found out that there's nothing on there, and you've looked at the data and it doesn't seem that way, you're probably not going to be impacted by your data being sold. You might even get a better rate. For insurance, if you're in the UK, it doesn't matter too much. But I think if you're American, then maybe that is a bit different. So I mean, yeah, it could be a concern. I think people get a little bit too worried, though. To be honest, I think that it is limited. It's not a complete full genome analysis. I think that it is also possible that moving forward, people will be able to use that data to make more sophisticated analyses, which could impact you. So if you are worried, then yeah, do ask for your data to be deleted now. But also, I don't know if I will be too concerned.
Awesome. And one final question to end this is, what is your mission right now? Like, what do you see, like what impact do you want to see you and Mouseable have on the industry, not in just the next 5 years, but maybe the next 30 or 40 years? What do you want to change about the industry?
So the impact of soft electronics on skin is we target mice because it's a big market and it's a small animal, and it can do a lot of good to helping remove to sort of help alleviate suffering. But my ambition is really to move beyond this one sector. We're in a position where we can test advanced flexible electronic materials in a very challenging environment. I would say maybe the most challenging mammalian environment. We move forward from that. We would want to see it in other animals, veterinary applications to hopefully support monitoring there. Also in other research animals to have support monitoring there. But also my ambition really is to have a foothold in on-skin sensors generally. It's a competitive market, but it's 16 billion on-skin sensors and patches. So I believe that with our innovation, our extensive testing in these, in preclinical testing in particular, we will have a foothold to maybe cause a real impact in the wider market and have imperceptible sensors for monitoring humans, which obviously is much bigger in general, but also have impacts in areas and create value where people haven't really thought to look before. I mean, even with mice, because you can only get this data with implants, we hope to create tools which will answer questions people just can't answer right now. So I think it's almost having opportunities to be able to ask questions which they didn't think that they could before. We talk about mice as well, but there's lots of work done in there's a small kind of fish called a zebrafish. So we're stepping towards that as well. So I think I'd love to see the R&D move further. I mean, we've got to show that we have value in mice, and that will really help us get this first step. But having a more comprehensive set of technologies which we can really monitor and understand animals, and then move to the step where we can start using tools to predict how they behave. I think it will do a lot, not only in improving the question we ask, but also maybe reducing the number that we need to use. As we get more of this data, we can start to be more confident in how they behave in response to certain stimuli. And I think this is maybe where AI tools would come in, is that you can start to have a more comprehensive view on how living systems behave in response to certain stimuli, and maybe then you can start to model more widely how certain pharmaceuticals or whatever it might be might impact behavior. But I think in terms of an ethos, we really want to reduce, replace, and refine animal research. But we also want to make sure that people can ask questions to progress the state of knowledge more quickly, so we can get to the point when we can make biomedical research more impactful overall.
Amazing. Thank you.
All right, fantastic.
Bye.
We'll see you
Enjoy the
soon.
weekend.
Nice to meet you as well. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the conversation, please like and subscribe to Waffle Bites. We have some exciting guests coming on soon. You can find out more about Liam through his LinkedIn on screen and in the description down below. But for now, see ya!